Hi everyone, welcome to episode 1 of Startup Playbook TV. I am your host Rohit Bhargava, and today I'll be chatting with Zubin, who's the co-founder of the Remynd App. Today we'll be chatting about how to reach your customers, getting the right feedback, and co-creating with your customer base. Cool. Hi Zubin, welcome to the show. So for those people watching at home, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment?
Sure. Thanks, Rohit. Thanks for having me here. So my name is Zubin. I live in Melbourne, and while I work full-time, I'm also interested in starting up something on my own. And what I'm working on at the moment is something called Remynd. It's actually a fairly straightforward app. It's a way to make your mental notes less mental, and to stop having to rely on shitty time and date-based reminders for really important conversations. So for example, if I think about something that I need to speak to you about and I know now is not the best time to speak to you about it, I literally just put it in the app, link it to you in my address book, and the next time you or I contact each other on the phone, it'll let me know as the contact event happens that, you wanted to speak to Rohit about this. So that way, anytime I make contact with you, I have exactly what I needed to speak to you about right there. I don't need to load my brain with stuff like that anymore.
Yeah, fantastic. I would definitely use the product. So what sort of stage is the business at? What are you sort of finding at the moment?
Yeah, very early. So I built the MVP really to solve a problem that I had. So I used to be in corporate law, and this is a problem me and my team we always had, especially when you work across time zones. Interestingly, I found that the same problem happened when I was working with some developers overseas to flesh out the concept. The same thing, I needed to speak to them about specs and certain aspects of the app. And I could see how useful it would have been had I already had it when working with the developers overseas. So it's still very much at the MVP stage. And the next steps really is what I'm hoping to speak to you about, is to get in touch with target cohorts and work out whether it's actually fitting their requirements and running little experiments in them.
Sure. So in terms of reaching potential sort of segments of potential customers,
Yep.
Have you already, what sort of stage are you at with that at the moment?
Yeah. So I've identified segments that I think would find this particularly useful on the basis that its limited functionality right now solves a very specific problem, which is knowing what to say to someone when you have a contact event with them, especially when if people are time poor, it's particularly critical. So the immediate use case that springs to mind, for example, is real estate agents who typically have to remember a ton of information: property, who, how much, where, especially maintenance, or if it's rental or sale prices and stuff like that. So my next steps are really I've already made the list of 20-25 real estate agents that I want to speak to, get them to trial it because it's free at the moment anywhere, and learn from their daily use whether they even want to use it. I think it's intuitively really attractive for them. Initially, people have told me they would absolutely love to use it, but big gap between what people say and what people do, and that's the next step that I need to explore.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the things that a lot of startups fall into is they send out a bunch of surveys to potential customers, and surveys can work. The issue around surveys is often the questions are very leading. People are generally very nice, so they're not going to tell
That's
you.
Exactly right.
They're not. They'll say, "Oh, it sounds great. Let me know. I'll give you my email address." But the follow through is actually what's important. And more often than not, what you want to test is the dynamic of are people, depending again on your business or on what it is, that might be, will people pay you money to get this? Will people will people actively download and keep using it? What are their use cases? What's the kind of feedback? So a lot of it is about learning at the moment. So my question would be to you is what do you want to learn from the real estate agents that are using the product at the moment?
Well, two things. One is for them to change their behaviors. What does the app need to do, be like? How do I even help them remember that they have it, right? Because there's this, like you mentioned, there's a slightly artificial situation where, especially in a trial, people will download it because I've asked them to. But then I'm not going to be with them every day to say, well, you should use it. This is the perfect scenario in which to use it. So designing for that, so that they intuitively think, actually, this is the perfect situation for me to start using Remynd, is one. How do I design that either into the product or into the trials? And the second thing is whether or not measuring the extent of emotional appeal it has for them. So it's one thing for people to intellectually and abstractly say, yeah, that I would use that. That sounds useful. It's another thing for people to say, gosh, I can't now not do without this. And it's, I think where it would be great to hear your point of view is how do you actually get people who are fundamentally polite but unmotivated to spend time on what you want them to spend time to actually contribute their time to it. It's not going to take much time, but it's still an effort.
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple of trains of thought on this. I think one is, it's hard convincing people that there's a problem, or to use a solution if it isn't a burning pain point for them. So more often than not, what startups will think when they sort of look at different customer segments is, I think, people in the, like bankers will use my product, so I'm just going to focus on selling it to them and then trying to pound down my solution down their throat, but not really knowing why it's not kind of working. I think the main thing that you always want to reverse engineer from your customers. Even asking people how they want to actively engage. It's hard for people to intuitively kind of do that. It's more based on their actions. So, I would almost, the 20 or 30 people that you've got downloaded, I would look at, when are specific times that they're using the app, when do they drop off? What are ways that you can remind them? So for me personally, when you were telling me about the product, for me it's really useful. I meet with 5 to 10 early stage startup founders every week. I've got 20 to 30 meetings. It's hard for me to, remember what we kind of discussed in each meeting, even at the end of the day. So if there was a way for me to, as I'm walking to my next meeting, to kind of write notes, that becomes really useful. And then, if that's saved against each contact every time I'm sort of got the next, meeting or whatever, I can kind of look it up.
Your meeting minutes,
so that becomes really, really valuable for me. And as you mentioned, like it's a very specific user case. When you first pitched it, I thought salespeople, would find this extremely useful because they're on the phone, 8 hours a day.
That's exactly
and they need to sort of contextually know who it is that they're kind of selling it to. I think it's difficult to find customers. Sorry, let me start that again. It's difficult to pound down a solution to customers that don't have that problem. I would more find customers who have the specific problem that you're trying to address, and look at ways that you can integrate your solution in there. And sometimes, oftentimes that just means in the delivery method. So I think like an app is the best way to do it because people spend most of their time on smartphones. They've got that with them at all times. Again, where people kind of fall apart is they have a solution that works, but their delivery method isn't right. So, it's a case of matching, who are your customers? What are their pain points? What are they struggling with? What is the solution that you can provide that helps alleviate those problems? And then what's the best delivery mechanism that makes them want to engage, download, whatever it is, pay you for that service?
I think you've made some great points. What's been interesting is because I didn't really expect it to catch on very much initially while I was doing my research, I didn't build a proper enough backend. I know I've got over 1,100 downloads. I just don't know what sort of people they are. But the few people who I have been able to reach out to have mentioned something which I'd never thought of, which is the meeting minutes point that you talked about, where some people are using it today to capture their thoughts pre and post meeting, and then have it ready anytime there's a contact event, which I hadn't actually thought of, which makes perfect sense now. That's a great point, so thank you.
Again, it's all like every startup, every business is about customers, right? Unfortunately, as startup founders, we have a very big vision of what it is that we want to create, what that looks like, what the product looks like, and those sort of things. But again, building products these days are fairly straightforward. The difficult part is how do you get customers and how do you engage customers in a way that they want to download this, refer this on, grow it into something legitimate. So I think listening to customers is by far, and again, like most of my podcast guests have mentioned this as well, listening to your customers and actually delivering them the solution that they want is what makes something successful.
That's great. That sounds spot on.
Cool. Anything else?
I do have a couple of other questions actually, and I think this is one of those things I've been debating both with myself and with others. When we talk about minimum viable products, of course we've all read Reese's lean startup and so on. I guess the question is being comfortable with how minimum it needs to be an MVP. You know, everyone understands the VP part of it. The M part of it is actually a bit challenging because there's this. I know Eric Ries talks about as well, this tussle between your sense of what it should be, your vision, your perfectionism, and your embarrassment at shipping a fairly crappy half-baked product. What are your thoughts on that? How minimum should the minimum be?
So again, just for a little bit of context for this, as startup founders, we're very precious over what it is that we're trying to create. Developers almost more so because that's their output of what it is that they're creating. And I think that has caused a lot of issues for startup founders who want to move really quickly, but developers want to hold off things until things are perfect, until they've built a perfect platform. Minimum to me is it's literally the advantage that startups have is speed. And to me, every single stage of that is learning. So, how quickly can you learn whether this is going to work or not? Mm-hmm. Because, all of us have ideas, all of us have multiple different opportunities that we can explore. It's much more effective if we spend 2 weeks figuring out whether an opportunity is going to work or not, rather than spending 6 months developing the perfect product only to find out that there's no engagement of that. So in terms of minimum, I would say literally what is, again, almost work out, what is it? What is the risk factor? What's the critical learning or critical dynamic that needs to occur for this to be successful or for this to fail, and test that. So one of the things that I tell a lot of startups who are building marketplaces who come from non-tech backgrounds, are we've got to build an entire platform and all of those things. A two-sided marketplace is literally you're testing whether you can populate one side of the market with another and get them to interact, right? You don't need to worry about a transaction or anything like that. You're just trying to see whether you can get both sides and whether it makes sense for them to interact. Literally the easiest way is start a Facebook group and start populating people with that, right? No startup founder wants to think about a Facebook group as an MVP of their product, but the amount of learnings that you will get from getting people from both sides and see if it works is literally, a week, as opposed to trying to find a tech co-founder, outsourcing it, spending a bunch of money, spending a bunch of time in doing that. So minimum to me is literally what is the simplest way that you can learn what it is that you need to learn to move on to the next stage of product development. Tech to me is something that you should be used to scale your reach, right? There's a company whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, really big shoe company, Zappos. Zappos. So for those people that aren't familiar with how Zappos started, so the guy literally wanted to start selling online shoes as an e-commerce play. No one was really doing that at that time. He literally went to all of the retail stores, asked them if he could take photos, sold it online, went into the stores, bought the shoes, paid full price, and went and delivered that himself. Right, that
just to prove that people buy online. That was the assumption.
That was the assumption. That was the hypothesis. He could always find retailers who were willing to give shoes. He could always find customers. What he wanted to test was whether, if he had both sides, whether they would actually buy things online.
It's a completely different buying experience.
Exactly. So for me, the MVP is all about literally the minimum. If you're a non-tech founder, even better. Use what you have and try and hustle and find the learnings that you kind of need in the simplest way possible.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. It's an emotional battle inside.
It's emotional. It's tough. It's definitely tough. But it's about how can you make this? How can you give this the best chance of success, and how can you ensure that you move?
It sort of makes sense to prove before you expend energy and resources. It sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, great. Okay. Do we still have time?
Yeah, we've still got a bit of time.
Okay. Cool. Great. The other question I had is it sort of links back to what you just said about give it a little bit of time, test your hypothesis and assumption, get the learning loop, right? So what is a reasonable expectation around time? How do you know that 3 weeks is just 1 week too short? I get it's gut and feel, but how do you learn to ask and give yourself reasonable goals and expectations?
Reasonable goals and expectations in terms of what?
A learning loop, for example. So I want to test this little feature. This is my hypothesis. If I say I'll give this 2 weeks to prove itself, maybe that's just unreasonably short. Maybe I need to give it 2 months.
Yeah.
How do you sort of develop a feel for that?
Sure. Again, it's to me, it's based more on, it's a combination of gut feel, and it's more a combination, again, of learnings, right? So if you're putting, so for example, again, if you're doing this for real estate agents, and you get 30 people to download, and literally none of them, once they download, use the app, use it more than once, things like that, I would want to dig in deeper. So again, it's the learning. I think a lot of it is like, whether you're doing sort of tests of traction channels, if you've got your product developed and you're looking at what traction channel might work for you, and what the ROI is on that, or whether you're literally testing whether the hypothesis of your business to see if it works or not. I think literally, and I think this is the theme of this episode as well, is just the learning that you're kind of getting from that. That can literally be a week, that can take 2 months. It's just a question of like, how quickly can you move? How many people have you got through? If people aren't engaging in the way that you expect them to, which will happen 95% of the time, find out why. Talk to them, which is why, again, I think a lot of startups and a lot of startups focus on trying to reach 2,000 people when they launch. They want to find out the quickest, viral or the growth hacking strategy to reach everyone. Again, I think for any early stage business, you want to touch the first, 100, 500 people. You want to find out as much in detail about your customer and the way that they interact and engage with your product. And the only way to do that is to literally be there, or talk to them in person, or follow up, or those sort of things. Obviously, it's hard doing that with 500 people, but you can do that in stages. So do that with the first 10, 20, 30 people that you're literally with them, sit down with them, go through all of those things, have follow-up meetings, record those meetings, see all of the things that come up. And then as you get more information about what works, what doesn't work, and things like that, you can look at ways that you can scale that. Again, I just think startup founders look at scaling things really quickly. It's about just getting as much information in a way until you have enough confidence that what you're doing works, that the value proposition is there, in a way that you can then sort of reach out to people at scale.
No, that makes sense, right? And I think, what I'm really hearing there as well is that as a founder, I've got to be open to the idea that I'm not actually creating this on my own. I'm co-creating it with my users as I go along. And include them in that creation journey, because they're also going to be using it. So that makes perfect sense.
Which is like, essentially that's what lean startup methodology is, really, right? Spoke to Ash Murray on the podcast, and he said that a lot of people, we spoke about how a lot of people, when they think lean, is literally, I'm spending no money on this, or I'm taking out a bunch of features. It's literally, as you said, it's co-creating. It's getting your customers part of that process. So you're building something that they want, rather than, again, creating a solution and then trying to fit that into the problems that they have.
It makes perfect sense, and I can understand that. That's good. That's a great answer.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I think that's fine. I think that's given me homework for 2017's first half, so that's good.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So if anyone watching at home, if they want to find out more about the app, get in touch with you, say hello, what's the best way for them to do that?
Look, the best way is I've got my contact details on the actual website as well, which is getremynd.com, which is GETREMYND.com. And that's a great way to get in touch with me, and it'll also redirect you if you want to download it off the Android store. Use it, give me feedback. It's great. It's a very simple app, takes almost no data, and I don't take any of your personal details yet, so that's fine.
Perfect. Zubin, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thank you.
For those of you watching at home, don't forget to like, share, subscribe this video. Also, if you want to be on a future episode, or just want to say hello, my email is rohit@startupplaybook.co. Thanks for watching.